So I thought this would be an interesting one. This is going to be our way to early power rankings. Yes, everyone loves power rankings, right? And, you know, we'll come around to the very, very exciting power rankings at the start of the season when that comes around. That's going to be probably nearer April time. But hey, let's not go a whole off-season without doing power rankings. Let's power rank people's off-seasons so far. Let's see where we think the teams are right now. And this is why these are called too early power rankings, because some of these teams don't even have rosters assigned for 2021. But we can take a look and have some early thoughts about where people kind of sit in terms of power level right now via the moves they've made in this offseason so far. And then we can continue throughout this offseason, ahead of the new 2021 season, to iterate on this, change this as more moves come in. We continue to change these power rankings until we get to a point where we're close to what we think we might have as our power rankings for the start of the 2021 season. So, let's go through this then, and I'm going to work from bottom to top, because I think that's always a nice way to do it. And at the bottom, I don't think we can put anyone else but Paris. And Paris, obviously, it's a nightmare of season for that team. When we look at that team last year, they were 4th in the league, and they were looking like a mighty team that was on the up. And then financial difficulties, COVID struck them, lack of sponsorship, and they've sold most of their roster. They still only got XC and FD God, and we don't know whether they're staying. And from what we've seen from like potential leaked scrims and leaked tryouts, we're seeing names like Muma, Jukaro 19, Onigod, like, I hate to say this, but Dallas Rejects, Crimso, I think it was Paintbrush, I think was another one. And there was a few others in there. It doesn't look like a roster that's going to compete. Like, it looks like, no offense Paris, a Boston level roster. And it's not necessarily, it's not Avala's fault, it's just Paris have got no money. It's as simple as that. And so they have to go with what they can get. And when you're paying the base level wage in the league, that's what's going to happen. You're going to be stuck with players that are not necessarily going to do too well. So I am putting Paris below Boston right now. Now, the reason I put Boston in 19th is because I had a feeling at the start of this offseason that Boston were going to make significant improvements. With Laurie coming in from WGS Phoenix, I thought Boston were going to move to an all-Korean roster, and I thought they were going to start making serious improvements to this squad. Then we got the news that for 2021, they were going to re-sign a bunch of players, including Color Hex, Punk, Fusions, and Mung Bong. Now, I don't disagree with Mung Bong re-signing. I think he's a great player. But when we look at the others, it hasn't really fitted in at Boston Uprising, especially Color Hex and Punk. And they're sticking with that. Now, maybe that's because Laurie wants to develop, and then in 2022, when there's a bit more money floating around in the league, they can improve again on that. But it does indicate a bit of a stale off season for the Boston Uprising, and so I don't think it will move them too much. And if it wasn't for the collapse at Paris, I would probably put him in the bottom of the list. It's just they've been benefited by a massive collapse at Paris, and there's nothing they can do about that. But in 18th we have the Vancouver Titans. Now, the reason I put the Vancouver Titans in there, they've only got Shredlock, Wolf, and Dalton locked down right now, right? But it also indicates not much improvement for the Vancouver Titans unless they seriously add to that squad. Now, there's been rumours, Agilities is on the market and things like that, so I still don't think that improves this Vancouver Titans squad much from where it was before, considering they had Shockwave, but Shockwave is rumoured to be leaving the Vancouver Titans, and I think that'll be a big loss for them going into 2021. So, even if they added people, more experienced names in the leagues like Agilities, I still don't think it moves Vancouver much away from the 18th place. I think that is where Vancouver sit right now. If they had cleared their roster out and started getting completely brand new talent, then they could have gone a little bit higher. But I don't see a reason to put them anywhere near middle of the league right now. 17th, we have Toronto. And this has changed rather recently for me, because when we saw Toronto ship everyone out and re-sign Logix, and I was like, I can be on board with re-signing Logix. I don't have a problem with that. And I thought the stonks were rising for Toronto Defiant. And then we see them resign Beast. And then the stonks kind of flattened out. And now I'm like 17th. Like, if they are going down that route, maybe they're going down a route to shape a team much like Fusion Uni used to have. If they perhaps try and bring in Banar and Fuse. But even with that roster, bearing in mind Banar and Fuse were at London last year, even with that roster, I still don't see that team being out of the bottom half of the league, to be quite honest with you. And that's why I haven't been too hot on Toronto in this list. They have time to prove me wrong. Again, they only have 2 players assigned to their team. And there's a lot of teams in this lineup that obviously don't have a lot of players signed right now for 2021. And so they're very much unknown entities going into that season. But this is, again, as I coined this, the way too early power rankings. So, you know, we'll see what happens. Houston in 16th here. And this is basically uncertainty around the Houston Outlaws. They're clearly going to build a team around Dante. They're not going to go all Korean like Dallas have gone. They're not going to splash a load of cash like Dallas have done. But they do have Junkbuck in now, which I think is a great signing at the coach role. Hydration is staying on, but they've got rid of all the Deadwood. There's no Raucus now. There's no Muma. And I think there is potential for this Houston team to be a lot higher in these rankings. A lot higher. Even in the top half of the league. But it all depends on who they bring in. And at the moment, we really don't know who they're bringing in. And the more these teams wait, the more I'm thinking, are they getting EU and NA talent? And the more I think about that, the more I'm thinking middle to bottom half of the league. So that's why Houston are where they are. 15th, Chengdu. Chengdu, because I think they're going to not do too much. I think they're going to say pretty much like Chengdu. And if they do what Chengdu do, then Chengdu will be 15th to 12th. Something like that, because that's what Chengdu do. They are the weird team in the league. Like, they get some really weird results, but they never get the consistency to get the higher place. And at the moment, they only have Leave and Molly signed down. If they were to lose Among, then that would be, that would set some fires going. But I don't see much going on with Chengdu at the moment, so this is why they're not moving too much. 14th, Atlanta. Atlanta is an interesting one because they have quite a few players signed down, like Iris, Gator, Hawk, Edison, Massa. They got rid of Ersto, which is a bit of a weird one, but they also got rid of some not so good stuff like FRD and Saucy, people like that. You know, players that weren't going to do much, let's be honest. And that opens up room for new players at this Reign side. They need new DPS players. I believe they are in rumors or have signed Pelican, which I think is a good signing. And I think it doesn't make them too much better than where they were, though. And that's another thing. It's not massive improvements right now. And there's no rumors of massive improvements for the Atlanta Reign. There's no big pickups like some of these teams coming up in a minute. So, again, I don't see the confidence in putting them anywhere above middle of the league to middle of the bottom half of the league. So, 14th, basically. NYXL next in 13th. NYXL are low in this list. Now, why are NYXL low in this list? Because they are the only team on this entire list not to have a single player signed for 2021. And we have seen them ship out a ton of talent. We've seen them ship out Nene, Libero as well, I believe. I can't remember exactly. They've shipped out Mano to Philadelphia Fusion. They've shipped out Mandu. They've shipped out both off-tanks, Bianca and Hopper. There's a big clear-out going on at NYXL. And we're left with like Sabiobi, Jonak. So they've still got some good talent to them when we see Libero, Sabiobi, Jonak and Animo still there. But are they going to be there come the end of this transfer window? Who knows? There's also rumours around in New York Excelsior going all Western. And if that is the case, NYXL are likely to fall in the rankings. So NYXL are where they are in these power rankings because of the uncertainty around the team. And we will wait and see what happens. But again, as I said for other teams, the more and more time moves forward, the more and more it feels like perhaps they're moving to more Western ideals. And if that's the case, I don't see them much further away from the middle of the league. Talking the middle of the league, 12th, we have London. London, we can make some assumptions about. London clear out, got rid of the old roster that caused them to finish like 16th, 17th this season. They still have Bernard, Glister, Fuse and Sanguinar, but we're expecting them to move on as well, and we're expecting them to promote British Hurricane and go all Western. Now, this is not going to get them probably top half of the league. Let's be honest about this. But British Hurricane are an incredibly good team. They have been tearing up EU contenders, and they have great experience at high-level competitions in Tier 2. So I would be willing to believe that this London team would do fairly well with British Hurricane and a little bit added to it. Perhaps the likes of Shockwave or Hybrid, someone like that. Maybe even Onigold if we didn't see him go to Paris or something like that. So I think this London team could do okay and see middle of the league. In terms of anything above that, it would be unlikely. They'd have to do something like a Valiant or something like that, and I don't see that happening from London. But I think London would be better than they were last season. That's what I would say, considering they'd have a roster completely together. They know each other, and I would hope good coaching from the Hurricane as well. In 11th, we have Hangzhou. They're not moving, basically, because Hangzhou, they've been so stable. Like, they've still got Architect, Gods, Godsby, I should say, QOQ, IDK, Coldest, Miko, Gouget. They're all signed down for the next season, which is fantastic news. They've added the Chinese DPS player Shai, promoting him from contenders. And I think that's just a great addition. I don't think it's a fantastic addition. I think it's a great addition. And then it just seems real stable. But it's not improvement to make Hangzhou go further up the league. And there are teams coming up from below them that are starting to nibble at the heels. But there are some teams above them, Paris and YXL, that may be falling below them. So it makes me think that Hangzhou may just get kind of stuck in the mud in that middle of the league area. And I don't see much that's improved at the Hangzhou Spark to say that they are going to start making moves upwards. So that's why I haven't put them 11th. 10th, slap bang in the middle, we have Valiant. And the reason we have Valiant is because they had actually a good year last year. We were expecting them to be 19th, and they ended up really doing well. So they exceeded everyone's expectations. Most of that roster is still there right now. KSP, Shax, Dreamer, Lastro, Rain. They did, however, get rid of McGravy. And he was the off-tank. And there are rumours around them signing Fuse and Bernard. If they do that, I think this team could actually be pretty decent. Like, pretty decent top half of the league. I still don't think it's a team that can compete with the top, I would say 6 right now, that we will see in this list. But I think this is a team that will be stable. I think Valiant will be stable. It's nice to see them holding on to a lot of good talent. And again, as I've said with some other teams, I don't see improvement, but I see stability, which is great news. Because for some teams, especially this offseason, we are not seeing stability. Like, we are really not. Florida Mayhem up in 9th then. Down on where they were at the end of last season. And the reason for this is uncertainty once more. We have significant rumours that Fate might be going over to the Shanghai Dragons after the Shanghai Dragons lost Fearless. If they lose that, they lose their staple main tank of 2021 and they have to replace them. We were expecting that to be Muse. Muse has found his way to the Los Angeles Gladiators, so it's not him. So who is it going to be? We don't know. So there's uncertainty there. Also, they only have 2 players nailed down for 2021. That's Yaki and Gangnam Jin. The 2 players you really, really want nailed down. But there are still question marks over the future of BQB. BQB is a massive, massive part of this Florida Mayhem side and honestly popped off massively for them last season. So really they need to tie him down. Also, they're still lacking a main support and we don't know who they're going to get in there. We were thinking Sanguinar, but that doesn't seem as likely now considering the Muse rumours didn't go ahead. So there's still a lot up in the air for the Florida Mayhem. So they moved down slightly. And that's because there are teams coming up now. There are a few teams, mainly 3, that are really coming up in the rankings right now due to their moves, and it's going to be super interesting to see how they kind of interact with these teams higher in the league. 8th, we have Washington Justice. Now they have moved up very, very recently because I was worried about the Washington Justice. Early on, it looked really good for the Justice. Then they started to lose Stitch and Janu, and we were like, oh no, Washington are going back to their old ways. But all of a sudden it started to turn around. They re-signed Decay, they've re-signed Tuba, they have signed Runaway main tank Mag, which is a fantastic signing, and I expected him to be going to a better team than the Washington Justice. It's a massive pickup for the Justice. And they've also just signed Jerry from the Boston Uprising. Jerry, one of the shining lights of that Boston Uprising team in 2020, one of the very few shining lights of that team. So it's a stable start for the Washington Justice, and a start that could see this team go forward with a good shot at 2021, but it's not it's not a top 6 team, it's not a top 5 team. Not right now. I'd have to see who they bring in the off-tank role, whether they can re-sign Janu or they bring in someone else. Also, we've got the question marks over the supports because we don't know who they're going to pick up either. So there's still a lot of question marks over Washington, but the early indications and what they've done are good. And that's why they get a favourable look over the teams like Florida and Valiant. In 7th, we have the Guangzhou Charge. Guangzhou Charge, I'm not expecting too many things to change. They have nailed down Eileen and Krong, 2 of their best players from 2020. New coaching staff at the Guangzhou Charge as well look promising. So there's a lot to look forward to for Guangzhou, but again, there are still a lot of question marks with this team. You know, Happy's not tied down. Rio, the main tank, yes, he's not the best main tank, but he's not signed down. And there's a question marks over Shu, who may be moving to the Gladiators. That's a rumor that's been around as well. And Nero, we don't know what's happening with him. So a lot of the players on the Guangzhou Charge are LFT or free agents and can move, and that's bringing in some uncertainty into the Charge team. But they have nailed down 2 very, very vital parts to that team, and that is great. A new coaching staff could propel them forward to more greatness, because they actually weren't a bad team in 2020. So I'm prepared to put them around 7th, but I wouldn't be prepared to put them any higher, because the top 6 teams at the moment I think are quite a far bit out in front of the rest of the league in terms of their power right now. But they have changed order. So let's start with this powerful top 6, shall we? First of all, in 6th, we have the Shanghai Dragons. I know, they're quite low, aren't they? And the main reason for the Shanghai Dragons being so low is the loss of Fearless. That cannot be overstated. Fearless was one of the best main tanks in the entire league last season, and they have lost him to the Dallas Fuel. It is not a great look. The only way I can assume this has happened is because Fearless was on a fairly low contract, because I don't think he was ever expected to be the starting main tank for Shanghai until his breakthrough. And basically, Shanghai couldn't match what Dallas wanted to pay. And Shanghai have lost him. And Shanghai, in my opinion, need to replace him. Stand 1 was not good enough during last season. If you take the season as a whole, he did okay in playoffs, but Shanghai came up short in the end. I think Shanghai need a new main tank. If they bring in Fate, I still don't think it's as good as Fearless. So I still think Shanghai have gone down in power. Also, they've lost potential weird picks like DM and Ding. They've really shortened down the roster. When we look at what they've got properly assigned, they've kept a lot of their really good core. So Isiaki, Li Gon, Void, Stand 1, Lip, and Fletter. They've still got that great DPS line, which means I still think they're going to be a very powerful team. But I think there are more powerful teams coming up. And I think Shanghai are like stalling, if not kind of rolling backwards down the hill. And that worries me for Shanghai. I am very interested to see if they sign a new main tank, and if they do, who it is. Because I think that's going to be crucial to where Shanghai finish in next season. In 5th, we have the Seoul Dynasty. Seoul Dynasty, I was worried earlier on in this off-season because they only signed Profit and Gesture down, but now they've re-signed Fitz, Marvel, and Creative. That is the main part of their championship finalist side, the team that got 2nd, obviously. Profit and Jester are never to be counted out. Fitz has been a great hit scan. Creative really popped off in the grand finals, so I'm glad to see him getting another year's contract at the Seoul Dynasty. Marvel is great to have on the team. I think they need another off tank, and of course they need a main support. But I think the Seoul Dynasty are in a pretty good shape to get decent parts for that, so I'm prepared to put them in the top 5. I still think there's that tiny little bit of uncertainty with no Toby and no leadership from Toby being in that main support role, and that may sort of unsettle the Seoul Dynasty slightly, and that's why they're a little bit lower. But next up, we've got 2 teams that are really surging up my power rankings right now. 4th, we have the Los Angeles Gladiators. The moves that are rumored and the moves that the Gladiators have been making are very, very interesting. So, the Gladiators have Birdwing, Kevster, Mirror, and Space tied down. They've also gone and signed main tank Muse. So Muse has played for WGS Phoenix, he's played for Paris Eternals Academy. He is a very good main tank, and he has been sought after in this offseason. We expect him to go to Florida Mayhem. It's not happening, he's come to the Gladiators instead. A Space Muse tank line seems like a very good tank line to me. Now we're waiting on the supports, and the rumours are they are after Shu and Moss. If they can get Shu and Moss, that would be the making of a very good team going into 2021. I think the Gladiators could have one of their best seasons yet with that roster. It will be very interesting to see what they do. There's a lot up in the air still, But I think the Gladiators are making extremely positive moves. Extremely positive moves. And I don't think that's to be underestimated. But I don't think they've made quite the positive moves that the number 3 team have made. This is, of course, the Dallas Fuel. No team has been quite as active as the Dallas Fuel in this offseason, have they? So, Dallas Fuel, they cleared out their entire roster. They got rid of everything apart from Doha. They re-signed Doha to a new contract, which of course was a great move. And then they go and raid Paris, get in Sparkle, Hambin Fielder, Rush, Aid. And then they go and raid Houston Outlaws for Repel as well. Then they go and raid the Shanghai Dragons for Fearless. This is shaping up like a roster that can compete at the very, very top of this league. Very, very top. And when I talked about there's been a top 6 sort of really powerful teams right now, and I think there's also perhaps a top 3 that are out in front of those, it could be Dallas and the other 2. Dallas are shaping up a championship title challenging roster here, and that's not to be underestimated. I think they've taken the best parts from Paris, they've merged it with arguably one of the best parts, if not the best part, from Shanghai, a great backup in Repel. We're waiting to see on who they get in as a main support. If it's someone like Unique, then it will be really, really good. This team is to be feared in 2021 with the way it's shaping up. There's always the question over Envy and Dallas and the way in which they're all run. It always seems to fall apart, or it always seems to go wrong. But if it doesn't work this season with the players they have, I don't know if it ever will. I don't know if it ever will, Dallas. So Dallas are right up there. But 1 and 2. So number 2 is the San Francisco Shock. Why are San Francisco Shock second? There is one major reason why San Francisco Shock are second. And that is question marks over Violet. Violet is not tied down to the Shock. Violet has been teasing us. Whether he's leaving, we don't know. But it is not certain that Violet will be a San Francisco Shock player in 2021. If that was to be the case, then Shock will go down in power rankings. That is without a doubt. Violet is a phenomenal player. And it would be a very, very big loss from San Francisco if they were to lose him. There's also questions over Moth and Super. However, San Francisco do have Ans, Striker, Tayo, Choyobin, Smurf, and Twilight tied down. So they still have a very, very good roster. A challenging roster for the title, right? But it may not be the all-powerful San Francisco Shock we've seen for the past 2 seasons. And so, they get usurped by the Philadelphia Fusion in number 1. Why are Philadelphia Fusion number 1? Well, because they've got great players, right? They've got Funny Astro tied down, they've got Alarm tied down, so they've got a fantastic support line. Like, one of the best, if not the best, support lines in the league. Then they've got Carpe and Hisu tied down. Fantastic DPS players. Like, unbelievably good DPS players. Then, we have question marks about Sado, right? We don't believe he's consistent. He really let them down in the grand finals. Well, they get in Mano from the NYXL. Consistent main tank, really experienced. He has been at the top of the league for 3 seasons in terms of main tank play, mostly. There have been some dark times, but the reason I think he didn't look as good for the NYXL last year is because he was alongside a main tank that was not suited to him. Now, alongside an off tank, I should say, and the off tank is where it becomes unstuck for Philly because we don't have anyone that's signed down. That's Poco and Fury with question marks over their heads. If they can sign down Fury and have a Mano Fury tank line, boy oh boy, that is massive. Poco also very, very good. I'm very interested to see who will be the off-tank for the Philadelphia Fusion next season, but when we look at Alarm, Funny Astro, Mano, Hisu, and Carpe all signed down, it's very, very good. Very, very, very good. And I don't think anyone would argue with that. I still think the signing of Mano is a very big signing for the Philadelphia Fusion. Very big. I think it offers them so much stability in that main tank role. And that's why I've picked them to number 1 over the Shock here. But you see how things are changing, right? You've got Paris rock bottom, you've got Dallas going right up there, you've got Glads going up. And it's testament to the massive changes that are happening in this offseason. Like massive changes. But anyway, I'm going to leave it here for this one. That was my power rankings right now. So Philly, Shock, Dallas, Gladiators, Seoul, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Washington, Florida, Valiant, Hangzhou, London, NYXL, Atlanta, Chengdu, Houston, Toronto, Vancouver, Boston, and Paris. It is a 25-minute video. I apologise for the length, but I'm going to leave it here for this one. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you'd like to give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.